Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Toomer Talk Show. I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer. I'm a family medicine and community health physician. So let me know where you're listening from. Say hello, and uh, and if you're listening later, put hashtag replay and let me know where you're listening from then. So let me ask you a question. When you gain weight, do you tend to gain it through the middle? And when you lose weight, do you find that it's your stomach is the last to go, or it doesn't go away at all? Um, the biggest complaint I hear from people is, about their belly fat, help them lose their belly fat. And when we gain and lose weight through our middle, it is metabolic. There's a metabolic reason, and I'm going to talk about those reasons. But there really is three things you can do when your belly fat bothers you. And that's quite common. It happens. But So we're going to talk about that. So if you're somebody who has belly fat, who's trying to figure out how to get rid of it, you're in the right place. Stay, listen to the end. All right, and then follow and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can connect with me there. And just going to say hello to Cindy, Marsha. Thank you for coming. It's great to see you guys. Thank you for always supporting. So when it comes to belly fat, like I mentioned, it is a representation of your metabolic status. And there are causes of your metabolic status that affect your metabolic status. Mainly what it is your genetics when it meets some other environmental trigger. And those triggers tend to be menopause, because again, estrogen drops, cortisol becomes unopposed. Unopposed cortisol causes insulin resistance. Insulin resistance causes brain missignaling, and the brain thinks you're not eating enough, or takes what you're eating, thinks you're starving, takes what you're eating and turns it to fat instead of into fuel. So that's menopause. Stress does the exact same thing for the exact same reason. It is when you're under stress, your cortisol level goes up. Your cortisol level goes up, your body becomes very efficient at making fat, and that's what happens. Pregnancy is another. Pregnancy is a hormonal shift that essentially puts us into 9 months of menopause. And that is why we check for diabetes during pregnancy, because it is so, diabetes being another metabolic disease. Not saying that pregnancy is a disease, it's not at all, but it does create a metabolic dysregulation. And therefore, pregnancy, and sometimes once our body has been triggered, our genetics have been turned on during pregnancy, it never gets turned back off, which is why women who have gestational diabetes generally go on to have full-blown type 2 diabetes, even if that gestational diabetes goes away after the baby's born. Polycystic ovary syndrome is another, causes insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, again, makes it so our insulin levels are high, brain can't use them, can't get glucose into the cell, miss signals, we make fat from food. Steroid use. Steroid. Basically, when we use steroids for, when someone has an infection and they need steroids, or they have an implant and they need steroids to suppress their immune system, all of that causes a disruption in our metabolic system. Again, cortisol is a steroid. And so when we take steroids, it's essentially our body does the exact same thing. Puts us into insulin resistance, can push you all the way into diabetes depending on where you started. And it really does then shift all the food you eat and shifts it to fat, and shifts it to fat into our middle. And like I said before, all of these can happen on their own, but they particularly happen when they meet our genetics. That is the number one. Genetics is the reason. It's the reason why we say people who can eat whatever they want and they remain thin have good genes. Not saying anyone else has bad genes, because there's no such thing. Genes are just genes. But that is essentially why that happens. And so in order to reverse this metabolic disruption, this metabolic dysregulation, there are the 4 M's. Hold on, I just need to delete and ban this person who's obviously a troll. All right, they're gone. So reverse the 4 M's. The 4 M's are number one, muscle. Muscle is, as I've always said, and I repeat this over and over and over again, muscle is our metabolic powerhouse. The more muscle we tone, resistance training, muscle building, Pilates is a good one. When you tone your muscle, your metabolic status improves significantly. When your metabolic status improves, your body shifts from making fat into making fuel. And when your body makes fuel, then you stop making fat. So therefore, you start putting stuff down in the middle. The second is meals. When you have metabolic dysregulation and you want it to not fuel it with any type of behavioral activity, watch your meals. Your meals can contribute to this. If you have metabolic dysregulation, which many of us have, those of us who can gain weight very easily and have difficulty losing it, usually have some metabolic issue going on. And so when you eat meals, they want them to be protein and fiber forward. So that's, basically protein and vegetables. Carbohydrates are actually what make the fat making very efficient in our body. So you want to limit your carbohydrates. You don't have to drop your carbohydrates necessarily. You can just drop the percentage of carbohydrates. So basically, when you eat a carbohydrate. So this is how I say, if this is your protein, this is how much carbs or less you should have. So that's how, it's just visual. So anytime or if this is the amount of carbs you want to eat, this is how much protein you should be eating with it. So it's a numbers game. And Cindy, I see your question. I am going to answer it when I'm done. And then the third of the 4 M's is meditation or mindfulness. Essentially what that does is it drops your cortisol. There's many different ways you can do this: deep yoga breathing, yoga in and of itself, meditation, hypnosis, Pilates also. Pilates is a wonderful tool to both drop cortisol and build muscle at the same time. And to answer Cindy's question, is Pilates obesity friendly? Yes, absolutely. Pilates for class 3 obesity. Pilates is a wonderful activity that is size inclusive, age inclusive, ability inclusive, because you can only do what you can do. And what you can do is always beneficial. So yes, it is very much obesity friendly. And it's also now the only time it's not friendly is if there's mobility issues, because there are some movement, but you can just reduce the amount of movement, but it's not because of size. So the 4th M is medication. If all the other things you do don't work, or you have difficulty doing them because you feel like you're white knuckling it through every single process, GLP-1 medications are corrective for metabolic status, and therefore they work very well. And so those are the 4 M's: muscle, meals, meditation, medication. So I said there were 3 things we're going to talk about, 3 ways that you could address belly fat. And so number 1 is improving your metabolic status. That's what all of this we just talked about is for. And then, and that's the medical side. The other side, which I guess is also medical, is surgery. When you have resistant belly fat and you've lost enough weight, built enough muscle, done all the other things, sometimes it requires surgery to remove it. And that is the most permanent way of removing belly size, if it bothers you that much. It's called an abdominoplasty. It is considered major surgery, and insurance usually doesn't cover it unless it is related to skin removal from excessive weight loss that is causing skin infections and difficulty. But other than that, it's all out of pocket. And the third way to deal with belly fat is accept it. So if you're someone like I am who has medical issues that mean that I cannot get surgery, and my physicality is limited because of a heart condition, the only thing I can do is accept it. So I have named my belly Dorothy because there's no place like home. And that is, so Dorothy and I have become very good friends. And I say good morning to her every day. I say good night to her every evening. And Dorothy's is there, and I've accepted her as being a part of who I am. And that is the ultimate way of dealing with belly fat. It's the easiest and the quickest way and the most efficient way of dealing with, your belly fat. However, just know that if there is an underlying metabolic cause, you always want to address those things simply because those do affect your health. So, and I talked about this, especially when it comes to health, in terms of hip to waist ratio, because hip to waist ratio does have an effect on our health. And so with men, you want to make sure that it's the hip. I guess you take the number of the hips over the waist, and you want it to be about 1. And for women, you want it to be about 1.25. So that is, so actually that was rather quick. So if you have questions, now is a good time to start asking them. I will also answer any questions you put in the comments below the videos of any of my videos. I have over 200 videos on YouTube of all different topics, health, wellness, and weight care related. And you can go there and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you find this helpful, if you found this useful, please share it on your social media as well. Share it with your family and friends. And the reason I say this, not because I want to be popular, although that's not a bad thing, it's because this is information that we're often not given, because many of the doctors that we see are simply overworked, and they just simply don't have time to educate on all the nuance of the medical process of what you need. And so there are many people out there walking around with metabolic issues who just simply don't know. And it's not like I say, oh my gosh, you have belly fat, how terrible. It's not that it's weight gain in your middle is a problem, except it's an indication that there's some underlying health issue. And so that underlying health issue needs to be addressed before it causes problems with other organs, like your heart and your kidneys and your eyes. And, you're able to feel your sensation. Dementia is another kind of what happens down the line if you allow your metabolic status not to be improved. So Mark said, I think I'll name mine Sarah, which means princess. Absolutely. I'm telling you, it makes such a difference. And then if she decides, she wants to take a vacation, that's fine, but until then, you just say, hey, how are you doing every morning, and accept. And it's just so much more enjoyable especially when you can't really do much about it. So any other questions? Or any other comments? No? All right. Well, again, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer. I am here every Tuesday live. My Dr. Toomer Talks. This was a rather quick one, mainly because this is a subject I know a lot about, and so I discuss it quite a bit. But I do want to say something about the acceptance. So I talk a lot about biopsychosocial. Basically, I talked already about the biology, which is the metabolic status. But the psychosocial part, don't underestimate it. Don't let people think you're vain just because you don't like your belly fat. Don't let people make you feel like you're vain just because, you've gained weight through the middle and you don't like it. because it is an indication of some health status. So that's important for you to pay attention to. But the other is it's your body. You're allowed to feel a certain way as long as it doesn't affect you to the point of stress. You want to have body positivity. You want to be able to look at yourself and smile. And you also want to be healthy. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can have both. And so when it comes to understanding why our body does what it does, the main thing is you don't blame yourself, because there are some underlying things that you can do, but there's also some underlying things that are driving what you're doing. And it's also driving what happens to food once you've eaten it. So that has really nothing much to do with you. You can help improve it, but it's often difficult. You cannot make it go away because it is, like I said, it's genetic. So you can control it, but you can't eliminate it. Just kind of reset. So I just wanted to make sure and put that out there, because I hear a lot of people blaming themselves and saying, oh, the reason I'm here is because I don't really exercise, or I don't eat well. Eating well and exercise will help, but it's also important to understand that the best way to deal with it is to correct the metabolic issues, and GLP-1 medications work really, really well for that. And then the other is acceptance, because your, medication and all the things can only do so much. And the most important thing is acceptance, because what I often see is people improve one area of their body that they don't like, and they get it to exactly where they want it to be. And so what they do is they shift that dislike to somewhere else instead of just eliminating it altogether. So if you love yourself and you love how you are, doesn't matter where you are, then no matter where you go, you'll love yourself even more. So Marcia says, thanks, Doctor. Short and sweet. See you all next Tuesday. Have a good week, everyone. All right. Yes. So I will see you next Tuesday at the Dr. Tumor Talk Show on Tuesday. And thank you for joining in.